Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is answering your questions. In a previous video earlier this week, I said if you had any questions, write them in the comments and I'll answer them on Saturday. Today is Saturday, so I'll get to answer your questions. Before I do that, I want to tell you a couple things that came up and stuff. I finished dyno session 3 on the mule. And tomorrow's video will be a video about the push rods, about whether small push rods versus thick push rods make any more power, what did it do to the curb, any of that. That's tomorrow's video. It's going to be very interesting. A lot of cool things happen in session 3. But the results for session 1 and 2 are in 2 separate books. These are available to purchase. If you purchase book 1, it's 38 bucks. If you've already purchased book 1, you can purchase book 2 for 30. But if you're purchasing both at the same time, then they're 38 a piece. You can get a PDF of version 2, and I sell that for 20 bucks, only if you bought version 1. How do you buy them? You can go to my website, wengines.com. You'll see a link there to my online store. You click on that link, and then you can purchase your books through there. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with technology, and I kind of get that, when you see there that you want to buy one of these cool books, anyway, and you see that in those cool books, and it says in the thing for the purchase, it says PayPal. You're like, I don't have a PayPal. That's just a processing. You can use your regular credit card. You don't have to use PayPal. So anyway, buy those. It helps the channel and whatnot. So let me get started with the questions as I pick up the ones that decided to leave me. There we go. Before I do that, we'll go through a couple things. I'll raise this green card every time I switch a question. So if I go to a different question, I'll raise this card. Before I begin, one of my viewers, TRX, you had sent me a video privately. I watched it, but I didn't know way to respond to it to tell you, do whatever you do, do not put a 1.75 exhaust valve in that head. That's way too big. 1.6 is fine for most small block stuff. V6, like in your size, you do not need a humongous exhaust valve. Matter of fact, to be quite honest, we probably are over exhaust valving most applications. So anyway, let's get started with our questions. I'll do the best I can. This first one says, from Michael Blacktree, do you have any experience with 4-valve dual overhead cam stuff? If you do, please share. Absolutely not. I don't mess with any overhead valve stuff. I shouldn't say any overhead cam stuff. So that's just not my field. I don't even have the a machine to take apart those type of heads usually, because I just don't have that stuff. I'm not set up to do it. I don't mess with 4 valves at all. So like several person on me says he only works on domestic stuff, and then you, Mr. Blacktree, responded, there are plenty of domestic 4-valve heads. Yeah, usually on 4 cylinders and V6s, which are 2 engines I don't mess with. Here's what I mess with: domestic V8 2-valve heads, and I have to be aluminum. Mine do cast iron too for valve jobs and stuff, but no porting. So hopefully answers that one. Preston Edmonds says, how can I determine if I have the right Holly strip dominator since they both have the same part number? Simple, you look at the top and you'll see if it's been milled off. You can watch the video and I show you what's in that one. How about pros and cons sorry, let me start that one over. How about pros and cons about going from single plane manifold to a tunnel ram? I could go into more detail of my manifolds I'm referring about. Here's what I would say. And several people have said you should have done a tunnel ram on the dyno mule. And I agree, that would have been a very good test. I will tell you, because from Engine Master's experience, and I know when I say that, most of you think of the show. No, it was actually a competition first. Tunnel rams make more power and torque, even at lower RPMs, than single planes, period. Why I didn't do it on the mule is because of this. I have 1 good carburetor. I do not have 2 good carburetors. So in order for that to be a nice tunnel ram deal, I'd have to have 2 good carburetors. And if 660 center squirters are okay for what people do, but that's not what I would run. I would want, probably for this deal, 2 750s, normal carburetors. So, but I don't have those. I just don't. So I can't test any of the tunnel rams. Obviously going to have them. And there's another problem that comes up with it too. Even though, let's say you had a tunnel ram and you had your 2 carbs and I had those, you still have to deal with tunnel ram linkage. So if we're looking at time on the dyno, it will take me longer to set up a tunnel ram than it would a single plane. But I know you're thinking, well, there's not that many available. True, Probably the only ones I would test would be the old strip Dominator from Holley. I think that's what it's called. Or the Pro Ram. That's what it is. Pro Ram from Holley. Edelbrock has a Street Ram, and then they have a Victor Ram. Those three, and then there's one that it's the newest one that's out there, and I really would love to test that because I think it would really wake up some small blocks. It comes from Alki Digger. They have a tunnel ram that looks like the bee's knee to me. I bet you that's gonna be a good one, but I just don't have to test the stuff to test it. As far as cons versus single plane, they only run really from a tunnel ram to a single plane. The con for the tunnel rams is obviously it's going to cost more. 2, you probably don't have hood clearance. And that's about it. So as far as performance wise, you have more torque down low, you have more up top, it's a win. And I know some of you older gentlemen or ladies might be thinking, well, that's not true. Back in the magazine days, back in the day, they said they would make it worse down low. That's simply just not true. My dyno testing has shown that to be not true, many others as well. And just to give you something else to chew on, think about the LS engines, and they have that Holley high ram. That's a tunnel ram. And it works well on the street because many LSs do it all the time. Do you plan on eventually going, this is from Driving with Drew. Do you plan eventually going up or down in compression on the test mule? The higher rocker ratio trick you were talking about, the engine master would be cool to see on this test mule also. I know it's hard on parts though. I do not plan on going up and down on compression by a large amount. So right now it's about 11:2 to 1. Because it's got flat top pistons. So the only thing that really would change is if I was to do something with the cylinder heads. So, and then the only way you'd get that is if you milled them. So maybe in the peak of that, keeping that same piston in there, I mean, within reason, I don't think we're gonna get the chambers down below 58 cc's really. So at that point, maybe we're 12 to 1. I'm just guessing the math here. But no, I mean, not really above that because I don't want to spend money. Because remember, when you're watching Engine Masters, that show, and I love that show. I mean, I love the majority of the show. There's, of course, obviously parts I don't enjoy, but for the most part, that's a really good show. And I'm not going to bash that at all. It's a really good show. It's worth a watch. But they have a much bigger budget than I do. And what I mean by much bigger budget, they're probably not reaching into their own wallet to drag out money to do testing. They probably have other companies that are helping this. And I do have 2 companies really that helped. Urson supplied a cam, and AFR supplied some cylinder heads and intake manifolds. Beyond that, everything else is out of my pocket. So it is a very pricey thing for an individual to do. If I had maybe the budget that Engine Masters does, where I could be like, well, I can swap pistons and pay someone to do it and all this stuff. Yeah, I would do it. I'd try a high compression. The other downside that I didn't want to, because I could have from initially, because the initial cost versus flat top versus dome was no difference. But what would be is the fuel. So I don't know how many gallons of fuel we've gone through, but it's been a lot. And it's just been pump gas with like a splash of 110. So it's very, very cheap as far as fuel price goes. That would not be the case, obviously, if we had a high compression. It'd be great to see how much more power it would make, because the AFR and forcer heads of which was run, they are now off the motor. We took it off on Thursday. That combination made 570. So I would be very curious to see maybe if we had pumped it up, say 13 to 1 or 14 to 1, could we got it to break maybe 600, which would be outstanding for an as-cast head. But I just don't plan to do that. All right, looks like go on the next page. They cut off your name. Sorry, buddy. What valve cut works best overall? I know every situation is different. You're correct. Every situation is different. So I can't answer that. I've got 5 different valve jobs for 45 degrees, 2 for 50, 1 for 52, 1 for 55. So there's a lot. It really depends on the head itself and how much things I have to work with. So chamber design, if it's laid back more or whatnot. So I can't really give you a good answer on that. Someone would take my answer and then use it wrongly. So if I said, which I do use a 50-degree valve job on most of my stuff, but it's because it's working with what I'm doing. It would not work with many of the other things. For instance, if I put on that Vortec head for what he's doing, it'd be a loss. So I can't answer that one. This one, somehow your name got cut off too. Sorry, buddy. It says, how is supply chain and which are more available for heads? That seems to be a question all have been asking. I would say supply chain still sucks because manufacturing kind of sucks. There's no polite way to say it. It's better than, some things are better, some things are worse. So I'll go through some of the major manufacturers and you can judge from there. AFR, which I work with closely, which I kind of do with products too, but AFR, I would say if you're getting a small block head, the 195s, the 210s, 220s, those you can get pretty easy. Those are pretty available. Not very long wait. The 227s, 235 and 245, those are a bit longer wait, but within reason. On the big block side of their stuff, I took 14 months to get a set of AFR 305s. So I haven't ordered anything since then as far as the big block side, just because I don't want to have to tell a customer, look man, I know it's supposed to be here 6 months ago, it's not here. So I don't have an answer for that part of theirs. I would say maybe they've gotten it fixed, but I don't know. I doubt it. On the LS side of theirs, I think that's better about getting resolved and it's more readily available. And then also on the small block Ford stuff, that's becoming more available too. Brodix, it doesn't matter which head you get from them. You're looking at a 4 to 5 month wait. And they're working as fast as they can, but at least they're putting out a product, but that's it. Dart, I don't really order a lot of stuff from Dart, so I can't answer that, but it doesn't seem like anybody's getting anything from Dart. Part of the disadvantage is sometimes when a private equity group takes over a company, they don't put out nothing, it seems like. So at least anything that Race Winning Brands has bought, that's the private equity group. Ever since they buy a company, it's like their production just sucks and they can't get anything out. Fine before, not fine after. I can't explain it, I don't know. So that takes care of them. Trick Flow also makes heads. They're good to deal with. They're behind as well, but not as bad. And then Profiler, you can actually get small block Chevy heads because they raised their price so high that no one, ever since they had their price increase, I haven't sold one set of their heads. So, but anyway, supply chains are better and than they were last year, but they're definitely not pre-COVID. Not even, I wouldn't even say half of what it was pre-COVID. So there you go. Looks like I've done that page, so let's go on next. I would like to see a dyno difference between a tapered 4-hole to 2 open spacer in a dual plane small block Chevy intake manifold. I'd already dyno tested the 4-hole versus the open. And if you're talking about the 2, are you talking about a divided center? I haven't tested that and probably won't. So there's that one. My B-Cam, that's his name. I would like to see a dyno difference between an intake that flows more on the flow bench with a wider, rounder divider between the runners and an intake that has more cross section with a thin divider between the runners but flows less, and then it cut off the rest. I think what you're trying to ask is, can you show an intake manifold that when you bolt it to a head, it actually flows worse? Because, and I've said this before, you could put a big fat divider on the intake manifold. We're talking about the intake manifold here. You can put a big fat divider on there, and you can flow it, and it's going to flow way more than if I had a thinner divider. But those big fat dividers usually squeeze down the port, so it doesn't move as much air. So then when you port it and you make it larger, I have seen it make more power, and I think they're asking me to show that on the dyno mule. Maybe, but it won't be for a while. So I've done a lot of other dyno testing as far as intakes, but that'd be a good one. The problem is although every single one of the manifolds that are here now, they're all thinner dividers. I mean, every one of them. They're nothing like they were. So I was talking about the older Super Victor 2925. Those dividers were thick, but if you get a 2925 now, they're thin. This is from Joseph Barscarelli. I spoke to you on the phone. I usually don't forget anybody. I usually forget about just about anybody that talks to me on the phone. You have to tell me what head if you ordered for me and you call me up, be like, hey, how's my stuff going? And you tell me your name, I won't remember your name, but if you tell me your head that you purchased, I will, just as a note. But anyway, it says, I spoke to you on the phone about Victor Jr. heads, and you had mentioned that newer AFR heads are light years ahead of these. I realize flow numbers are lower, but can you post a video which goes into details as to the newer, and then it cuts you off too? it would be really great to post that video, but I don't have a set of Victor Juniors to compare it to. But yes, the AFR heads, the Eliminator ones, are light years ahead of the old Victor Junior heads. They just are. So a Victor Junior head flows like 285. The combustion chamber isn't as modern as the AFR. Exhaust ports aren't as good. I mean, and then if you take just a basic AFR head, I mean, shoot, I think the 210, it flows like 290. So they're better. They just are. Not to mention the valve translator too. This is from JC's Garage. 383 hydraulic roller, 243, 251, 9.5 compression ratio, Brodix IK 200 heads. Looking for the best single plane, Brodix BM1000, and also if I wanted to upgrade heads to go to the solid roller, AFR 220 versus Brodix Dragon Slayer. First off, your compression ratio is pretty low for that cam. You're 9.5 to 1, you have a 243, 251. Dude, bump up that compression ratio. Try to get around 10 to 10.5 to 1, because that's a lot of cam for. It's not that you can't run it. What happens is you just don't have any low end torque, because compression builds torque, and having a smaller duration cam also gives more cylinder pressure, hence more torque. You have no compression ratio hardly, and you have a larger cam, which isn't building any cranking compression. It'll be kind of soft down low is what I would say. Now, if you don't care because you're like, I'm just going to spin the tires anyway, which may be the case. I just looked at the cam, it wouldn't be my choice. Then you're putting a single plane on it, which also makes it have less down low as well. I think driving around, you'd feel like it was really soft. The track would probably feel okay, but I think you'd get outrun if you had something with a smaller cam. So you would go faster and it'd feel faster. But which one? I'd say that Brodix BM1000 is pretty good. It really is. That's a good piece. If you didn't do that, that BMP one's pretty good too. Even the AFR, that one's a nice one as well. I think leaving that clover leaf and stuff in it'd be good. As far as AFR 220 versus Brodix Dragon Slayers, I sell both. If you're getting them out of the box, the AFR 220 will beat the Dragon Slayer. However, if in the future you ever decided I'm going to port these, that ported Dragon Slayer will beat a ported AFR. Just saying, from me anyway. Okay. By the way, I don't know if I'll get through all these questions just because this is how many there are, and I'm limiting myself on time because I got stuff to do too. This is from Doug Crosby. Bowl shaping. Why not plunge cut the intake bowl? Do you go a little more on the bore side since you don't want air to turn there as much? I don't plunge cut that stuff because it's never straight. Sometimes it's off, and sometimes I take more from one side or the other. Granted, it might save you some time, but most modern heads, if you did a plunge cut, it'd be pointless because they're usually bigger in the bowl anyway, so you'd be plunging into absolutely nothing. But even let's say you did a Vortec head, it would save you time for sure if you did a Vortec head because of cast iron stuff. But most aluminum heads you would never do that with. It's bigger than you could plunge. Plus, I move more from one side than the other. Eric McCain said, Eric Weiner, when experts like you port a set of LS heads. I am not an expert, by the way. Remember, I make plenty of mistakes and often am a fool. They always say not to lay the intake short side back much. Can you use a pitot tube to determine how much that you can lay it back and just try to keep the airspeed there and then it cuts you off too? The reason why we don't, I mean, if you go back and watch those videos where I did internet ports heads, it was an LS head, and I showed if you lay that back, it really does kind of mess things up. You do need it laid back some, but you can't dramatically do it. And here's the reason why. There's some dude, and I don't get this is new to me. People will actually email me just to argue with me a point about some cylinder heads to tell me I'm wrong, but it's something that they read and never tested. Because usually I will ask the question, can you provide any evidence? Do you have any dyno numbers or anything else? And nothing. It's usually something they read, not something they done. The great thing about this dyno mule thing is, like I say, you know what you read, I know what I've tested. But anyway, back to this laying back the short side part. On a lesser degree head, say your LS heads, as you move that, which I'm not doing a good job. Let's say this is 23 and this is 15. Well, as you move this, that short side is going to get, so this is 23. As you move it to like a 15-degree valve job, it gets stood up more. So when you laying it back more, it actually makes it aim that way, and it makes things worse as far as the short side because it needs to make that turn to go in, at least on this side. So if you lay it back too much, that's typically why it hurts on those LS heads because they're a lesser valve angle. On a small block Chevy, we're talking like 23 degree, or even the small block Ford, there's still 20. You can lay it back more, but you're not as steep as an angle. So that's one of those things. Now, it's not to say you can't lay it back, because they are pretty abrupt, like they're straight up. So leaning it back does help, but understand this, there's gonna be a point where it's no longer helping and it's hurting, which that's really is with any head, but just something to keep in mind. Okay. Daniel Delph, I would like info on flow changes from 194 to 202 to 205. I guess watch one of my videos, I'm not for sure. I do a bunch with different heads, but this is something I will totally say. If you simply cut to a larger valve size and do no port work, you're gaining nothing, hardly. You really aren't. You have to do work with it. If you just simply cut the valve job, you're not helping yourself really. Because the valve isn't really the restriction. It's right underneath it, the throat, typically. So if I just make the valve larger, the throat's still the same size. So it didn't help a thing. That's why you have to grind. Now, don't get me wrong, when we do the valve job, sometimes it cuts out the throat and makes it a little bit bigger, but usually it'll leave a step too. So if you don't do any port work, it's pointless. This one's from John Aubrey Mitchell. Are you still going to test adding runner length to a single plane? Thanks for asking that question. As you might remember, I was going to weld on extensions on that trick flow manifold and retest it. I haven't, and the reason why is simply time. But the other thing is now I'm glad I didn't, because that's one of the manifolds that has not been touched. So now when I switch to the Pro Max heads, and then later maybe to a different set of AFR heads, I will have a control. So I can say, well, now I can compare these heads to what it did versus this heads with the same manifold that hasn't been modified. Because I think all the other manifolds in some way have been modified from the initial test, besides that dual plane. So that's the only single plane that hasn't been. So I kind of need to leave it alone, I guess, what I'm trying to say. But that was the one I was going to add, run those extensions to. Maybe when we get to different heads, we'll do that. I do think I could have done that though on that Enforcer head just to see if I couldn't have got more torque. I don't think there's any more power so much per se left in that thing from the manifold. But eventually, yes, I know I didn't get to it on this one just because I want to keep this manifold the same to use for every head. So I can say the same manifold on all these heads made this much power. Great videos. This is from Rich Alberts. Great riddles. Do you ever test or work on spread port small block Chevy heads? I've only done that one test for that one. It was like the race small block Chevy head. You can go back and look in the video for that. It's the only ones to come in. Those are pretty rare, at least in my genre. I'm sure people that are more high-end stuff see them, but I just don't. So I can't test what's not here. All right. This is from Turbo the Realist. How long have you been porting heads? I like how you put energy into what you love and very knowledgeable and helpful to your customers. Some would argue I'm not as helpful as others, especially if you call me up and say, hey man, I bought this heads from Jegs, Summit, etc. Can you give me some info? Then I'm very not helpful, because usually it instantly makes me angry. So, but anyway, how long have I been porting heads? Really since I was 16, but a lot of people say that because they kind of inflate how long they've been doing it. But it did start when I was 16, but I would say in a great capacity where you had, where I was doing more of it, I'd say about 2005-ish. That was definitely when I was doing more of them, and flow bench testing kind of began. Before it was just whittling away and see if it went faster. So hopefully that helps. Dirt for race more. As a dirt guy, I like to know the difference between running a 754V carb with 6,500 RPM versus a 2V 4412 with a 7K rev limiter. Would the power be close with, say, factory head, same camshaft? There's a lot of circle track classes right now that run that, and the tracks that are here. It really depends on what your rest of your combination is. So it's not so much even the carb. I'll say this, the two barrel stuff, it really does limit you. However, if you're a dirt guy, because Keith, he's the guy that works for me, we've done this. If your track doesn't have a lot of traction, you can go faster using the two barrel, because he did it. So he actually had problems with, he went out in heat racing and ran a 4-barrel, and it wasn't doing very well. And then the track became dry slick. So because his 4-barrel wasn't working well, we switched to 2-barrel, and he actually did go faster. Had it been a track that had good traction, no, he'd have got left. So I think 4-barrel is better. Looking at the dyno stuff, it's like 100 horsepower better. So yeah. This one got cut off too. How would a tunnel ram affect your dyno mill, both ported and unported? I think I've already talked about that one. Lollipop, here goes. What color underpants do you wear? Whatever my wife gives me. And then what's going on? This one was weird. Hobbies Mania 2001. Can increase in compression ratio improve head flow to partially compensate for less ideal head flow? Example, can a head flow increase by raising compression instead of changing heads? It got cut off, but I'll save you. Increasing compression ratio has nothing to do with the flow of the head. You might argue in an actual live engine having a dome would decrease the flow because it has to go around the dome. But you got the two confused. Carl W.F. Pfinder. Sorry if I said your name wrong. A lot of people still run Victor Jr. small block Chevy intake. I didn't see it on the comparison dyno runs you made. What would be the difference with one, comparatively speaking? And the engine guy replied, it's a poor performing intake manifold. I believe he was one now to test. We'll be interested to see how the combination, the magazines have beat this manifold stuff to death. I did test it in dyno session 3. It's the new number 1. You have to wait for that video. All right, going back. Justin of Jesus of Jesus Avila. Dude, in your last video, the intake performer RPM with the divisor cut down. You could try cut all the divisor. Cheers from Venezuela. I could cut it all the way down and maybe we'll see what it do, but we'll see. HH. Can a spread port big block Chevy head with a sub 100cc combustion chamber be ordered with 225, 188 intake valves? I suppose I've never done it. I don't know why you would. The chances are you'd have to see how close that valve is to the bore, because even if I don't know what you're trying to do it for. I just don't know why you would do that. If you're trying to get it on a small bore, if that's what your goal is, you'd still have to be careful that it even didn't clip the side. So you could, but what you'd have to do is you'd have to get like a CNC core where the port's really, really small, and then put it in there and then design your whole port from there. But it's not impossible. I like to know why you'd want to do that. At what point in the head porting, this is from Michael Thompson. At what point in the head porting process do you do the valve job? That's the very first thing that ever gets done. Should be your first thing. Why didn't you test the 2-barrel on the Performer RPM manifold? Time. I just do it on the EPS manifold because I know in circle track a lot of people run that with that, and the RPMs are usually illegal in a lot of the circle track classes. I've already answered that one. Adam Smashy. How about some impressive E7TE head content, or just hated iron stalkers to general show how they can be done with wasted time, money, and trick parts. Of course, someone donate something impressive as to not waste your time. The reason why is because I think that's the Ford head I'm thinking of. It's a 302 Ford head, because those suck. Well, you shouldn't invest any time in those. What you should do is you should go to the scrapyard and throw them away and get whatever money you get from them, and then go buy something decent, because you will spend 40, 50 hours on them just to have a head that doesn't flow as good as and I'm saying it, a Pro Comp aluminum small block Ford head. So yeah, what you can do with them is you can throw them in the trash and then do whatever, and you could find just about any other head that's better. GT40P, if you're trying to get a stock one, is better, like light years. I mean, we're talking about that head only flows like 165 CFM, and you're going to try to put on a 351. There's a reason why the Fords had the 302s sucked for such a long time, until someone's like, hey, we need to put better heads on these and then it'll be better. I mean, they're bad. I know Ford guys are like, oh, it was amazing. No, be honest with yourself. Once people put on like an AFR, a Caneville, any other head, that's why Pro Comp took off so much, is because that one for sure it would improve. On a small block Chevy, if you had a set of Vortec heads, you put on a set of Pro Comps, you went slower, but on your E7 TE heads, it picked up. Tommy Cook, hey, I have a question. I've been watching for a while a lot of the head porting videos. I have some small block Chevy Patriot Freedom heads, 188cc 202 value. I am still learning, but I would like to get 500. Can these heads get there close? If you ported them, maybe. Maybe. That's about it. I haven't ported a set of those in a very, very long time, because Freedom, those Patriot Freedom heads, now Pro Max owns Patriot, and those, they don't even sell those a long time ago, long past. Pat X35, if possible on the dynamo, can you test Dyno Mule a build with flat top versus dome pistons? I've talked about this. He wants to see what would the same compression ratio with the dome versus a flat top. I don't have the budget for that. I don't have the Engine Master budget to do that. Colin B. Have you ever done GM 2.2 122 cylinder head? I'm assuming that's for a 4-cylinder. I'm gonna probably insult a whole lot of 4-cylinder guys and get you raged right now. Why? I know I haven't, and I'll tell you why. I can't see porting a set of 4-cylinder heads, even if I charged an insane amount and could make a ton of money on them. You're gonna spend money to port these heads, and you're gonna put a turbo on it just to make what a stock LS does. And I'm not even an LS fan, so I never understood that, which I could already like, oh, this 4-cylinder with 90 pounds of boost runs 7s. What's yours run? I can already see that coming. Yeah, I like to see them do it 2 passes. Maybe my hate for the 4-cylinder import stuff, and I don't hate the guys. Obviously, if you like what you're doing, just keep doing it. Who cares what I say? I'm just a dumbass. But I guess part of it is because it seems like every time I go to the track, I don't care what vehicle I'm in, whether Camaro or truck, there'll be some 4-cylinder in the lanes in front of me. And what they've done is, I know they do it on purpose. They wait for some stock Camaro or Corvette or something to get in lanes, and then they try to rush there to get right next to them so they can make, look, I smoked them, or a Mustang as well. Look, I smoked this Chevy Corvette or Camaro, whatever else. And typically when they do it, it's one of 2 things happen. They will beat them and water the track or oil down the track, or they'll just water and oil down the track. So, and then I'm usually behind them, and I've got my suit on, and then the Camaro, there ain't no windows rolling down, it's hot as hell. So I'm like, I just get so angry. So, more than you wanted it, though. Okay. I'm fixing to have to cut this off and let you guys go, and you may not get all your answers on this one just because I need to get stuff done. Robert Shear, I would like to see how a properly sized flowing head for a given combination engine displacement responds to a tight LSA 105, 106 to a shelf 110 cam advancing and retarding by 2. And then someone said, I like to see David Viserid's formula. Dyno says 406 needs 105, 106. I don't use David Viserid's formula. I'm probably going to lose some subscribers on that. I think if you use it, it doesn't work that way. But anyway, the tight versus longer LSA, I've done a test for that's coming up, because we dynoed another 4.6 last week, and that one had a 104, and then I went to 108, and I'll show you what it does. And then I'll show you tell you what it did on the track too. But I do think there's more factors that play a part to that too. So the LSA is really just dependent on your valve, where your valve events take place. But to me, it's how I'm trying to manage some cranking compression, because it kind of builds torque. And I know some people are wrong with that. I just one of the pieces of the puzzle, but I wouldn't want to know compression ratio. So obviously, if I had, like, say this is 15 to 1, I would never run a 105. So it really depends more on your compression ratio too. Kings of the Planet. Love your name, by the way. Hey Eric, been watching all your videos. Man, they're awesome. You must be extremely bored. But I do have a question. I know you said you didn't have much experience with blueprint engines, big block 365cc. I'm just wondering if, and of course it cuts off the rest. I'm wondering if I have probably had an experience with that head. I haven't. It just hadn't come in. So sorry I didn't hit that one. Sean Lombard, do you have an accurate flow data group of GMP, small block Chevy fast burn cylinder heads? I don't think I flowed that one. So no. John Rodriguez, what makes more power, or what is better to run when you have a choice in a new build? Total seal rings on the top ring or second ring? I don't actually run those. I run total seal rings, but I don't run the gapless. I have before, but that gap is like, it's pretty narrow. It's like 20 thousandths or something. And the piston's up there for like a fart. And I just can't, there's not a lot of air that actually leaks past those gaps. So having a gapless thing, it's not a big deal. Really, it's not. You're not losing that much air through them. I would probably never put on the second ring. I'm sure someone's gonna argue that for that. I don't get it. So typically we run more gap on the second ring than we do the top ring. So having the total seal on the bottom one doesn't make much sense. It feels like it would make the top ring flutter. But I don't know. I run gaps. I have run gapless before, but I don't anymore. I don't have back-to-back dyno data to tell you which way on that either. Now this is gonna get cut off too. Cutups, I probably said that wrong. I would love to see you take an out-of-the-box AFR head, pick up an untouched cylinder head, cut the intake and exhaust ports in half, and then port another heads, and same thing. So what you want me to show you is me cut it up, cylinder heads, to see how different they are. No, because usually I would waste the head. However, AFR actually has those cut-ups of their heads. When I was there, they showed them to me. Okay, I think this is going to be my last page of questions just because I'm running out of time. And this video is long. Let's face it, half of you probably have already stopped watching, more than half. I think the statistics would say 25%. Riley Dalton, what's your opinion on me adding 1.8 roller rockers to my twin turbo engine with aftermarket 227, 625, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, running 20 pounds of boost, high spring pressure to avoid valve float. Would it be an issue? I would say don't bother. On an NA deal, you're going to gain, I don't know, maybe 10 if you're lucky, over 1.7 to 1.8. But on a turbo deal, you could just cool it like 5 degrees more and make more power than that, or just turn it up half a pound of boost. I don't think it's any advantage, and the likelihood to go into valve float, not that you would be higher. I don't think there's an advantage for yours in that situation. Matter of fact, I almost think it's worse, especially on the exhaust side, because now it's opening up against so much more force, so it's more likely to break something. I just wouldn't do it. So high rocker ratios are probably better on NA stuff, but I don't like to use them on boosted applications. That's me though. Chevy RC. Hey Eric, my question is, have you ever had a manifold leak air like bottom half of the port? Mine did. I was wondering if you ever heard or an issue to fix it. It's a Hurricane version 1. I haven't. I have several now because we have so much on the dyno have leaked water from the top. And which by the way, if it was on a real engine that I was using in a car, I would never run it. On the mule, we're like, screw it. It's gonna leak out the water. We'll be done in about a minute and a half. As long as it doesn't go in the wall, I think we'll be okay. A minute and a half will be fine. So they do leak out the top. I've never seen them leak out the bottom yet, thank God. So I don't have an answer for that one. I would say maybe it got milled wrong, or your heads are milled wrong, the wrong angle or something. I don't know. Travis Beavers, what sort of port work can do to a set of small block Mopar heads for boost? Or should I just leave them in low compression and low flowing, balling on a budget? One of the biggest misconceptions is you don't need to do any port work if you add boost. That is incorrect. Just do the normal stuff you would do if it was NA. That's what I would do. You'll make more power with less boost, and that's always a good thing. Wayne Skelly, once you upgrade the heads, maybe try different rocker ratios, also different header tube size and different collector sizes. Great job so far. The huge sacrifice of time and money is greatly appreciated and by this data geek. The rocker ratios, the problem is because I only run shaft rockers. So in order to do that, I'd have to buy new rockers, and those are expensive and also a long wait. So we talked about the parts availability. Rockers still suck. If you could try to get any rocker, good luck. Anyway, so I can't test that just because it's a really huge budget thing to do. So I would like to, but I ain't got the money for that. The header tubes, I used to have, when we were doing, back in the Engine Master days when I was competing, I used to have a bunch of headers here to test with. I have none now. The only ones we're using are the one that's on the dyno, which is too bad because I had a great set of 1 3/4 step to 1 7/8 with the merge collector. That'd have been a good one. Really, even the S10's headers, if I compared that on there, but I think it hit the dyno cart. That would be a good one too, because those header tubes are long, but would be great to test. I can't do it. I just don't have the budget. Okay, and I'm gonna leave off one more, and this is, I know a lot of you really got missed. Sorry, I'm just out of time. But I want to leave one from my buddy Joe Carroll. Joe Carroll said, "Hey, I got his kind of memorized. What would you do now with the EMC with all the stuff you've learned?" And for you that don't know, those were back in the day we had competition with strict rules, and if you do know what it is, it was amazing. But I would say this, so all this testing that's done, very little even still applies to the Engine Masters just because we turn such low RPMs, and I don't do that on the dyno. I think that's kind of pointless, but I would say this, so I'll go to my best year, which was 2011 with that 406. What I would have done, because I've thought about it a lot, it had a 104 LSA. I've now done a 108, so I know for sure what that'd do. I think what I would have done is I would have gone to a 102 even tighter. Probably would have had to notch the pistons to make this work, but I'd done like a 102, maybe in a 100, and install it like at a 96, because I think I would have got more up there. As far as the heads go, the only thing on the heads is I wish, those heads aren't big by any stretch of imagination, but I think if I could have shrunk them down, I would have done a different design. Now I would have made the whole thing much smaller because it didn't matter if it fell off. I think that would have helped. I wish I could have tested headers like you guys did with the different links and collector and slipping that stuff on. I think would have made a huge difference. I also think the intake manifold is hugely important, and I think I did the best by luck, happened into the best combination for that intake manifold, because I can tell you what a whole one does not work for low end torque. That would be that. So you guys probably already stumbled into this, Joe. I know you spent enough time on the dyno with your camshaft stuff. I wish I'd have done much tighter LSAs. Even a 104, which was great, I think I could have got, if I'd done even tighter, it'd have fell off like a rock after 63 or something. Probably 6,000 as far as power-wise, but I think I could have got more torque. I really do think I wish I'd done a raised runner, the same head, but just an oval port, so it's much tighter and like hardly any changes on the size to keep it. I think I could have made a bigger difference there. Beyond that, knowing now what I do with the dyno stuff, I had done this too. I would have half filled the block. I would have filled it all the way up to the water deck with concrete. And then that's what I'd done, because in all of our dyno testing with the mule, that oil temperature gets hot, bam, super fast. Well, not initially. So it takes about 5 minutes. So you know how we used to have to run for 5 minutes or something to get that oil temperature up? Well, with the concrete, it takes a while to heat it up. But once it's hot, it stays hot, which is awesome. And then what I would have had them do is I'd had my last 3 pulls, I tried to use my 20 minutes times, because that oil would have stayed hot. I would have drained the water, because I know several people did it and I didn't have a clue what they were doing. That makes so much better sense now. I would have drained the water and ran brand new cold water through it, made a pool, but that oil would have still been super hot. So that would have been the ticket. So besides the stuff on the engine, that would have made those numbers, doing nothing else, would have probably pumped up another, and I know this because I've done it, it probably would have brought the peak horsepower up another 10 to 15 horsepower. The torque probably would have came up about 10. So I know that would have made a difference. So just to give you an idea, you know, I finished 6th that year, but I think it was like 6 points behind Randy Sherbert, who finished 5th. I think 11 behind the person that finished 4th. That would have jumped all of them. I just didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. But and that stuff that didn't even make any power, but it's kind of a way of cheating the dyno. But yeah, I would have done that. Anyway, guys, long video. Thanks for your questions. Sorry I didn't get through all of them. You guys take care. Wow, my butt.